And I know the gentlelady from Hawaii has now joined us, who's also been an important part of the Make It in America agenda. I'd like to yield to Congresswoman Hanabusa.
Thank you very much. It's very fascinating to watch the both of you go back and forth on this. You know, Hawaii doesn't have manufacturing like the traditional form of manufacturing. However, there is one part of our economy that is very critical and that's under fire. And I'd like to discuss that because I have some statistics as to how, when we protect what is made in America, we are able to actually see the results. And I'm talking about the Jones Act, which has different ramifications for all over. But for Hawaii, because we are in the middle of the Pacific, what we tend to forget is that our oceans are our highways. And what people think is that, gee, if we had ships coming in from foreign flag vessels, you know, we might have a reduction in the cost. And that is exactly where we do not want to go. Let's talk about manufacturing and how it affects us. First of all, shipbuilding. The gentleman from California and I sit on the Armed Services Committee, and tomorrow in one of the subcommittees, they're going to discuss the 30-year plan of shipbuilding in the military. And the military, I know from conversations with my own hometown people who are in the maritime industry, that they have been called to Washington because the NAVSEA component wants them to continue to build in America. They want them to build the ships because the military can't continue to keep this industry alive. And they need help from the private sector. So let's look at why wouldn't the private sector do this? And one of the pieces of legislation that has been there to keep the private sector in the manufacturing of ships has been the Jones Act. Now let's understand what it means for a state like Hawaii, and then maybe we can, by going through that, understand what the ramifications are when we talk about Make It in America, because people may not see the actual connection to how we benefit from it. We have, for example, in my district alone, 16,494 domestic maritime industry jobs. This is the second highest of all congressional districts. This is according to a PricewaterhouseCoopers Transportation Institute survey or statistic that they did. Now, the total gross economic output from domestic maritime activity is $3.389 billion annually for the state of Hawaii. The gross output is defined as the sum of receipts or sales and other gross income generated in this maritime sector. Executives and other workers related to the domestic maritime industry receive total compensation of $785.9 million annually. The total value added for goods and services moving by domestic waterborne transportation is $1.24 billion annually. The state of Hawaii is a top contributor to the domestic maritime industry, ranking basically in the top 8 of 4 categories. Top 8 now. And think about how small we are. Jobs, economic output, labor compensation, and value added. There are over 23,000 domestic maritime jobs in the state of Hawaii, and the total gross economic output for the state is well over $4.7 billion annually. And the related labor compensation is $1.1 billion annually, and the annual value added is about $1.7 billion. Now, nationally, the domestic maritime industry accounts for about 499,676 jobs, $29.1 billion in labor compensation, $100.3 billion in economic output, $45.9 billion in value added, and $11.4 billion in taxes. There are more than 40,000 vessels in America's domestic fleet, one of the largest in the world. But remember something, and one of my senators made a statement, and I was stunned by it. He said, after World War II, in terms of ruling the high seas, America had over 90%, and we are in now, I think, the low 20s. Now, what does that mean for us? Think about the industry. Think about the manufacturing. Think about the high-quality jobs that just the maritime industry represents. And what are we doing about it? We know trade. We also know in terms of the military that the maritime industry is critical, but the military alone cannot keep that industry alive. That is why, let us not forget, the Jones Act comes from the Merchant Marine Statute. And what is it that has been done in the past? In the Persian Gulf War, for example, and in other types of areas where we don't have enough ships, we go to the private sector, and we're able to do that because they are American flagged, American owned, and American manned. Man, not to be referenced to anything other, man or woman. But that's what it's all about. We are, no matter what, the greatest power in the world. That's what we are. That's what we represent. And why would we not recognize that there are many things that we do best? And we ruled the high seas, as they said. And now we're willing to sacrifice that to other countries. That should not be it. Because trade, maritime, is a major component of our success and our ability to continue to be independent. And we know, the gentleman from California and I, as we sit through many of our hearings, that the new military is looking at a marriage with the commercial areas, the marriage with using all of the different ships plus airlines to transport things. And that's the future. But to make that future a viable future and a cost-efficient future, we have got to continue to make it in America.
Yeah.
I yield back.
Thank you. And I think the other very